Dear chosen ones, prepare yourself, because what you're about to realize isn't something everyone can relate to. This goes far beyond angel numbers, tarot readings, or meditation apps. This isn't just about a spiritual interest, it's about a divine activation. What we're diving into today is something that happens to only a rare few in the world, not to the loudest, not to the most public, but to those who were quietly set apart from the beginning, people who weren't just born to survive this life, but to shift it, people like you. You may not have the full picture yet. You may have spent years wondering why you feel things so deeply, why your mind doesn't rest like others, why your presence seems to either attract deep love or uncomfortable reactions. But here's the truth that will hit home today. There's a specific, deeply spiritual symptom you've likely been experiencing, one that most people ignore, mislabel, or never even notice. It's not loud, it's not showy, but once it starts, nothing in your life stays the same. It quietly reshapes your thoughts, rewires your emotional responses, cracks your identity wide open, and begins to reconstruct your entire reality from the soul outward. This, dear one, is the hidden sign that you're not just waking up, you're remembering. You're not just curious about the spiritual world, you were called to guide others through it. And the moment you recognize this symptom for what it truly is, your past confusion starts to make perfect sense. That fog you've been walking through, it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You've been chosen to carry a light that doesn't just illuminate your path, but reveals the truth in every space you enter. Before we dive into the layers of this transformation, I want to pause and thank everyone who has supported this channel through Super Thanks. Whether you've given financially or simply offered your energy, comments, or time, please know this: your support means everything, and whether you donate or not, I am deeply grateful that you're here. You are part of this chosen frequency, and your presence alone is powerful. If this message already feels like it's speaking directly to your soul, drop a 999 in the comments right now. Let it be your public declaration that you're not only awakening, you're owning it. You're stepping fully into the call God placed over your life, even before you were born. Now let's get into it. Because once you understand this one symptom, the one that only the most powerful chosen ones ever experience, everything in your life will finally start to make sense. God's chosen ones, only the most powerful experience this spiritual awakening symptom. Most people dismiss the first ripple. They assume it's just stress, burnout, or maybe they're just in a weird mood. But what if I told you it's none of those things? What if I told you that what you're feeling isn't confusion, it's a divine activation? This isn't some random glitch in your emotions, it's your soul remembering why you came here, remembering who you are underneath all the noise, expectations, and conditioning. And here's what makes this moment so sacred, so rare, so untouchable. Not everyone experiences it. In fact, most never will. This spiritual symptom only visits those whose frequency is strong enough to carry the weight of collective transformation. That's right, what you're carrying isn't just personal, it's prophetic. It's for the world. And if you've been feeling this, let me be the first to confirm what you've already suspected deep down. It's not a mistake, it's not fleeting, and it's certainly not going away. This isn't a breakdown, it's a becoming, a remembering, a return, and it's the sign that you're not just awakening, you're being chosen. But let's go deeper. This symptom doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt or some cinematic vision. No angels burst through your ceiling, no sacred voice booms from the clouds. It begins in the stillness of ordinary moments. You could be on your way to work, washing dishes, scrolling through meaningless posts on your phone, or folding your laundry, when a whisper cuts through the silence. This doesn't feel like me anymore. And that one whisper, though subtle, is the opening of a spiritual floodgate. Suddenly, the life you've been living starts to feel like a costume. Your job, your relationships, your lifestyle, even your dreams, they all begin to feel borrowed, inherited, scripted. You're not sure where you got them from or why you ever cared about them so much. And that single flicker of realization leads to a series of sacred, unsettling questions. Why do I even want this? Who told me this was success? When did I stop feeling alive? Have you ever had that moment where you look around your life and wonder, who built this version of me? Was it culture, family, fear, the world? What you're experiencing is the unraveling of your false identity, and that's no small thing. That's the first layer of the chosen one's awakening, the dismantling of the false self. Do you feel like you've outgrown the room but don't yet know where the door is? That feeling isn't just emotional discomfort, it's spiritual misalignment. And it's by design, because chosen ones aren't allowed to stay asleep. Unlike others who can numb themselves forever with distraction and conformity, you can't. You've been marked, you've been summoned, and so your soul starts to rebel against everything that doesn't align. Consider Jim Carrey, the actor who reached the pinnacle of fame and wealth, only to admit in interviews that none of it satisfied him. He once said, "I wish everyone could get rich and famous and everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer." His discontent wasn't depression, it was a calling, a crack in the illusion. Or consider Mother Teresa, who often experienced long seasons of silence from God, but she still pressed on because she knew that her soul's mission was bigger than emotion or applause. She was chosen to carry light into the darkest places. Could it be that your discomfort is actually your confirmation? This awakening is not just a phase, it deepens, it intensifies. You try to distract yourself, maybe a new routine, a vacation, a temporary high, but it doesn't go away. It becomes a persistent ache, a quiet scream that says this isn't your path anymore. This is what I call the energetic mismatch. You're now vibrating at a frequency that your current life can no longer support. It's like trying to play a symphony through broken speakers. The sound was never the problem. Your environment just can't carry it. And this is where things begin to shift irreversibly. You begin to see through the matrix. You start noticing that conversations feel hollow, that success feels stale, that chasing approval feels like betrayal. You're not imagining this. You're awakening. In Jeremiah 1:5, God says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." That means this calling, this breaking open, didn't start with your job, your childhood, or even your pain. It started before you breathed your first breath. So why would your awakening follow the rules of a world you were never meant to conform to? Think of Simone Biles, the Olympic gymnast who stepped away from competition to protect her mental health. The world didn't understand it. Some called her weak, but what they didn't realize is that she wasn't choosing comfort. She was choosing alignment. She was honoring her inner voice over external noise. That's what chosen ones do. They don't perform for applause. They walk away from fake lights to find real peace. Are you willing to do the same? And when this awakening truly begins to unfold, something strange happens. You feel torn. Part of you wants to go back to the old life. It was comfortable, predictable, accepted, but you can't. It doesn't fit anymore. It feels like trying to wear shoes you've outgrown. They look fine, but every step hurts. And even if you try to return, the universe has a way of sealing those doors shut. Conversations dry up, opportunities vanish, old paths crumble. Why? Because this isn't a change, it's a departure. You're leaving behind a version of yourself that was never really you to begin with. The shell is cracking, and inside that shell is the real you, the version God designed before the world told you who to be. Romans 12:2 urges, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's exactly what's happening. Your mind is being rewired, your soul is being reintroduced to its original instructions, and there's no going back. Once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it. Consider Maya Angelou, who said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." She didn't just write poetry, she lived as a prophet, her truth echoing through generations. Her awakening wasn't gentle. It was born through trauma, injustice, and isolation. But she rose because chosen ones always do. And perhaps you've wondered, why me? Why now? But the real question is, why not you? Why wouldn't the universe pick someone like you? Someone who can carry the weight of truth with humility, someone who has been broken but still chose to love, someone who didn't quit when the darkness got loud. Psalm 139:14 reminds you, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." Even Elon Musk, for all his controversy, has openly spoken about how lonely it is to be on a mission others don't understand. He's not just building rockets, he's rebuilding paradigms. Just like you're not just living, you're leading a quiet revolution of the soul. Can you feel it? So here we are. You're not imagining this awakening. You're not broken. You're breaking through. The thoughts you've been thinking, the emotions you've been hiding, the restlessness you can't shake, these are sacred signs. This is the invitation, and if you're brave enough to keep going, you'll realize you're not losing your mind, you're finding your spirit. And that spirit, it was never lost. It was just waiting for you to remember, waiting for this very moment. John 15:16 says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last." And that fruit is ripening now, inside you, around you, through you. You are not just awakening, you are answering, you are chosen. After the initial wave of disconnection from your environment, just when you think you've adjusted, the second shift arrives, and this one cuts deeper. You begin to feel it not in places or tasks, but in people. Relationships that once felt effortless now feel strained. People you used to laugh with suddenly feel like strangers. You sit across from someone you've known for years, family, best friends, even romantic partners, and feel as if you're speaking entirely different languages. It's disorienting, heartbreaking even. But hear this clearly, it's not because you're becoming superior, it's because your soul is ascending, your energy is rising, and not everyone around you is rising with it. Have you ever walked into a familiar space and suddenly felt like you didn't belong there anymore? That's not in your imagination, that's the friction of frequencies shifting. And when you're chosen, this kind of spiritual static becomes inevitable. So what's really happening here? You're not being rejected, you're being recalibrated. Your energy, your vibration is no longer syncing with the frequency of those around you. And when that spiritual misalignment reaches a certain threshold, the universe doesn't whisper, it acts. You'll begin noticing strange behavior. Friends who once checked in regularly now withdraw without explanation. Loved ones misinterpret your intentions. Words you speak from love are met with defensiveness or confusion. Places you used to feel safe in, homes, churches, parties, circles, now feel energetically suffocating. And here's where the danger lies. This phase is so emotionally painful that many abandon their awakening entirely, simply to preserve their old connections. But you, chosen one, cannot afford to do that. Why? Because your soul won't let you. Your spirit has tasted truth, and it refuses to go back to playing small. So even though it hurts, you push forward not out of pride, but out of divine necessity. In this season, you will often ask yourself, why am I losing people just when I need support the most? But what if you're not losing them? What if you're being preserved? Preserved from energies that would pull you backward. Preserved from attachments that once served your survival, but now sabotage your growth. In Luke 5:37-38, Jesus says, "And no one pours new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins." You are the new wine. You are being restructured for a new level, and not everyone from your past can carry what you are about to become. Think about Oprah Winfrey. As her spiritual awakening and success grew, she spoke often about how lonely the journey became. She lost friends. She was misunderstood. People she trusted betrayed her, but she kept moving forward because her calling was bigger than her comfort. Or consider Nikola Tesla, whose genius and frequency set him apart from nearly every peer. Misunderstood, mocked, and largely isolated, yet the future he foresaw is the one we now live in. Are you feeling similarly distanced from the world around you? That's not punishment, that's prophecy unfolding. This second layer of the awakening symptom teaches you one of the hardest truths of divine elevation. Not everyone is meant to come with you. And more than that, not everyone can. It's not their fault. It's not yours either. It's just that your path has diverged. The rhythm you now move to is tuned to a higher spiritual tempo. And when others aren't in sync, it creates emotional dissonance. But don't be deceived. Loneliness here does not mean you are alone. It means you're being refined. This isolation is not a void, it's a womb, a sacred place where your next version is being formed in quiet, just like a seed breaking open underground before it ever reaches the light. Ecclesiastes 3:1 reminds us, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." This is your season of shedding. It's your season of soul gardening, pulling up the weeds, thinning out the dead branches, making space for divine alignment. And that space may feel empty now, but soon it will be filled with new connections, soul-aligned relationships, purpose-driven partnerships, kindred spirits who speak your language before you even open your mouth. And isn't that what you've always longed for anyway? People who see you, not just the version you performed, but the real you, the ancient you, the one who feels like fire and stillness all at once. The friends and lovers and mentors of your future won't be threatened by your light, they'll be lit by it. So if the current stage feels like a season of subtraction, know this: God only removes what cannot carry the weight of your next blessing. Consider Lady Gaga. As her artistry deepened and she began revealing more of her authentic spiritual side through her work, she spoke candidly about the loneliness and misunderstanding she experienced, especially from people close to her. Yet that same path led her to global influence, advocacy, and deep healing. Sometimes chosen ones must walk alone for a while so that others can eventually walk in the light they've prepared. And have you noticed the pattern in your own life? The more you grow spiritually, the less you feel the need to explain yourself. That's not apathy, it's alignment. The truth is, you're not for everyone. And that's the point. You weren't sent here to blend in. You were sent here to shift the room, to disrupt the pattern, to break the generational spell. And that kind of power will always trigger insecurity in those still living in the illusion. So if people distance themselves, let them. If the room feels heavy, leave it. If silence surrounds you, honor it. Psalm 1:1-3 says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord." That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season. You are being planted in higher soil now. Let the old leaves fall. And remember Prince. Behind the music, the fame, and the mystique was a deeply spiritual man who often felt misunderstood by the masses. He isolated, not because he didn't care, but because he was stewarding something sacred. He refused to dilute his essence to fit expectations. You too are learning how to protect your presence like that, because what you're carrying now isn't casual, it's covenant. So as the world rearranges itself around your rising energy, trust that none of this is random. You are not being abandoned, you are being aligned. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. The spaces that once felt like home now feel tight for a reason. You are outgrowing the shell, and when that happens, the cracking is inevitable, but so is the emerging. Isaiah 43:19 declares, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." You're not lost. You're being rerouted. You're not breaking down. You're breaking through. And soon the tribe meant for your frequency will find you, not by sight but by spirit. Then suddenly, without warning, the world feels too much, too loud, too bright, too fast. Places you used to breeze through, crowded markets, loud gatherings, fast-paced offices, buzzing social events, now feel like storms crashing against your skin. But this shift isn't mental, it's spiritual. You're not becoming socially anxious, you're becoming energetically aware. Your nervous system is no longer numb to the static of this world. Your spirit has tuned itself to a higher frequency, and as a result, everything that's not aligned with that frequency becomes jarring. Have you found yourself needing to step away from conversations that used to excite you? Does small talk now feel suffocating? Are you craving quiet, nature, or even just being alone in your own energy without apology? That's not you withdrawing. It's you refining. You're not shutting down, you're being summoned inward. At this stage of the awakening, your senses become amplified, not just physically, but spiritually. You no longer just hear words, you feel intentions. You don't just walk into rooms, you sense the climate of energy. You notice the tension in someone's jaw, the heaviness behind their smile, the frequencies hiding beneath their laughter. You may even find that your body starts rejecting things it once tolerated, certain foods, artificial fragrances, processed environments, even technology. The TV feels too loud, the lights are too harsh. Your favorite snacks suddenly upset your stomach. All of this can feel inconvenient, even alarming, especially when there's no logical explanation. But chosen one, this is not dysfunction, this is purification. Your field, Your aura, your nervous system, your spirit is being cleared for divine accuracy. You're not just seeing anymore, you're perceiving, and perception is the gift of the prophetic. 1 Corinthians 2:14 says, "The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolish. But the person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things." You are that person. You've been given spiritual discernment, and that discernment is showing up in your sensitivity. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. In a world that applauds overstimulation, your sensitivity is a holy rebellion. You are no longer tolerating what dulls the soul. You're returning to what nourishes it. Think about Albert Einstein, often considered not just a genius, but an extremely sensitive being. He would escape into music and long walks in nature to reset his mind and spirit. He once said the monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind. That wasn't introversion, it was intuitive necessity. Or consider the life of Harriet Tubman. She suffered intense spiritual visions and seizures, many of which helped her guide enslaved people to freedom. Her heightened senses were often misjudged by others as ailments, but they were her divine navigation system. Can you see how your sensitivity isn't a defect? It's a tool, a weapon of clarity, a map that only you can read. And yet, this awareness comes with a cost. You begin to feel everything too much sometimes. People's unresolved trauma, hidden envy, passive aggression, restlessness in a space where no words are being spoken. You may wonder, am I imagining this? No, you're just picking up what most people have learned to suppress. Your clarity is inconvenient to the unconscious. Your ability to feel what's unspoken makes you a mirror, one that forces others to see themselves more clearly. That's why you might start to feel like you need space, and lots of it. Silence becomes more sacred than conversation. Nature begins to feel more like church than any building ever did. You're not running from the world, you're reconnecting with your source. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." So if you're finding yourself retreating more, spending long hours in thought, seeking calm, soft spaces where your spirit can breathe, trust that. That's not laziness or isolation, that's spiritual recalibration. You're training your energy not just to survive, but to detect, to protect, and to discern. Protection for the chosen is not hiding, it's wisdom, it's stewardship. It's knowing that where your attention goes, your power flows. Think of Keanu Reeves, a man who, despite global fame, often avoids the spotlight, known for his kindness, silence, and space-holding energy. He moves differently, he feels more than he speaks, and the world respects him for it, not because he forces attention, but because he protects his peace. That's what you're learning to do now. You're not rejecting people, you're just no longer negotiating your spirit to make them comfortable. Have you ever felt exhausted after being in a room for too long, even when nothing bad happened? That's not imagination, that's your energetic field telling you it needs to recharge in sacred solitude. And when others don't understand this shift, they may label it, "You've changed." Yes, you have. You're too sensitive. Thank God you are. You're distant. Because your soul needs distance to grow roots. You are not called to be constantly available, you are called to be constantly aligned. And alignment sometimes demands space. In Psalm 46:10, God reminds us, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness isn't passive, it's prophetic. It is in the quiet that you hear the clearest instructions. It is in the pause that your power recalibrates. Even Beyoncé, amidst her grand stage presence, has shared about her strict energy boundaries, needing silence and spiritual clarity to perform at the level she does. Behind every massive move is a sacred stillness. You too are learning this truth. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You just need to honor them. The sensitivity you've been given isn't here to burden you. It's here to guide you. You are being taught how to move by spirit, not by noise. And the more you listen, the sharper your discernment becomes. This is your compass. The world has compasses made of logic and survival. You have one made of divine energy. So as your body shifts, as your nervous system rejects what no longer serves you, as your soul pushes you towards stillness, remember, this is not regression, it's refinement. The chosen are not called to live numbly. You are called to live deeply, to feel what others suppress, to hear what others ignore, to move when the spirit whispers, not when the world shouts. And yes, this will make you different, but that's the whole point. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to detect the shift and lead it. Now, as your awakening matures and anchors itself deeper into your spirit, something quietly yet profoundly strange begins to happen. Your urge to prove yourself starts fading away. Not because you've lost your passion, and certainly not because you've grown lazy or directionless, but because your soul is shifting from ego-driven survival to purpose-driven creation. You may still be successful, you may still have goals and dreams, but the obsessive hunger to dominate, to outperform, to be the loudest voice in the room or the most recognized name in the crowd begins to dissolve like mist under sunlight. And yes, at first, this can feel like you're losing your ambition. But are you really? Or are you finally discovering a truer, purer ambition, one not rooted in applause but in alignment? Have you noticed this shift within you? Where once you chased trophies, now you chase truth. Where once you longed for accolades, now you long for authenticity. You're not losing your edge, you're just changing the battlefield. You've begun to understand that real power isn't about being the best in a broken system, it's about being brave enough to build a new one. You're replacing the need to compete with the call to contribute. While others are scaling ladders, you're stepping off of them and asking, why are we climbing this in the first place? This is not apathy, this is spiritual evolution, and only the chosen feel this kind of reorientation. Consider the life of Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers. He had all the tools to chase traditional success in television, but he chose instead to create a quiet, slow, deeply impactful space for children and families. He didn't crave mass appeal, he craved meaning, and that meaning shaped millions. Or look at Malala Yousafzai. After surviving an assassination attempt, her purpose became greater than personal ambition. She didn't seek recognition, she sought justice, education, and healing. And in doing so, the world recognized her anyway. Do you see the pattern? Chosen ones don't shout their importance, their presence speaks for them. This stage of your awakening brings you to a sacred realization. Your value never came from your resume, your follower count, or your net worth. It came from your spirit, from your story, from your scars and your stillness. And once your soul truly understands this, you stop begging systems for recognition that were never designed to honor your depth. Instead, you begin to withdraw from the race, not because you're quitting, but because you've outgrown the prize. Philippians 2:3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves." This doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means you start dreaming differently. The dreams become less about me and more about we. Less about climbing over others and more about lifting them. Less about spotlight and more about substance. You begin asking yourself questions like, what legacy am I really leaving? What truth am I living? What change am I building that will outlast my name? This is when chosen ones truly start to separate from the crowd. While others are chasing visibility, you're chasing impact. While others are consumed with optics, you're focused on outcomes. While others are desperate for control, you're seeking divine alignment. You learn to move not out of pressure, but out of peace. And the wild thing is, once you stop chasing validation, real success finds you naturally, not because you're trying to be seen, but because your soul is finally shining without filters. Psalm 75:6-7 reminds us, "For promotion comes neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge, he puts down one and sets up another. Your rise won't come from hustling harder, it will come from surrendering deeper, and that surrender opens creative gates within you that ambition could never touch. You stop competing because your path is so unique. Comparison becomes irrelevant." Look at Steve Jobs, who was never satisfied with just building products. He wanted to create experiences, shift culture, reimagine how people engage with technology. His hunger was never to be the richest man in the room, it was to be the most visionary. And even he said, "I want to put a ding in the universe." That's the mark of a chosen one, impact over image, contribution over competition. So let me ask you, what are you building that the world hasn't seen yet? What vision lives in your chest that doesn't need approval, just obedience? The truth is, The systems many fight to climb were never built to hold the souls of the chosen. Your blueprint was always meant to be different. That's why your motivation is shifting. That's why your old goals no longer excite you, because now your spirit isn't moved by applause, it's moved by assignment. In Galatians 1:10, Paul writes, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God, or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." And that's exactly what this phase of your awakening teaches you. You weren't born to be palatable, you were born to be prophetic. You're not here to echo trends, you're here to start revolutions of thought, of spirit, of purpose. Take a moment and reflect. When was the last time you created something just for the love of it, just to feel aligned with your calling? That moment, that feeling, that's your compass now. You're no longer trying to be impressive, you're trying to be inspired. You're no longer driven by external pressure, you're pulled by divine design. And as that design takes over, you start realizing you don't need to fight for space in the world's systems. You're here to build what the world hasn't dared to imagine yet. Think of Jane Goodall. Her mission wasn't glamorous, it wasn't loud, but it was purposeful. She followed a deep call into the forests of Tanzania, driven not by validation but by vocation. And her quiet obedience reshaped how we understand life on this planet. Your mission, chosen one, will often look illogical to the world, but to heaven, it's a masterpiece. So if you've been feeling like your fire has changed, like your ambition has morphed into something quieter but deeper, know this: you're not fading, you're focusing. You're not stepping back, you're stepping into something eternal. Your ego may mourn the spotlight, but your spirit rejoices in alignment. This is the essence of chosen purpose, not louder but truer, not more visible but more valuable, not driven by applause but carried by God. And when you finally release the need to be the best, you open space to become your real self, the one who was never meant to win the world but to change it. You stop pushing for recognition and start pulling heaven down into everything you do. You move differently, you live lighter, you build slower but stronger. And that, chosen one, is what separates you from the noise. You are not here to impress, you are here to ignite. And the fire you carry, it's already lighting up rooms you haven't even entered yet. You begin to notice it, not in grand, dramatic revelations, but in the smallest, most subtle disruptions to your everyday rhythm. You check the clock expecting 5 minutes to have passed, and it's been an hour. Or the opposite, you've only been sitting for a moment, yet it feels like you've drifted through hours of thought, as if your soul has been traveling while your body stayed still. What is this strange distortion? It's not poor focus, it's not distraction, and no, you're not losing your grip on reality. Quite the opposite, you're beginning to perceive reality as it truly is. Your consciousness is no longer chained to linear time. This is one of the most disorienting yet profound symptoms of awakening for a chosen one. It's not about time slipping, it's about your soul stepping outside of it. Have you found it harder lately to keep up with deadlines, appointments, or long-range planning? Do routines that once grounded you now feel suffocating or artificial? That's not irresponsibility, that's initiation. While most of the world is still enslaved by ticking clocks and strict schedules, you, chosen one, are beginning to live by something ancient and infinite, divine flow. The deeper your awakening goes, the less power the past and future hold over you. Why? Because your spirit has started to live inside the now, the only place where God actually resides. And when you're rooted in the present, time as the world knows it begins to dissolve. Suddenly life stops being a race to some destination and starts becoming a dance with eternity. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also he has put eternity in their hearts." That's what you're feeling now, eternity within you. Your body may still walk by the calendar, but your soul is listening to a different drumbeat. You're no longer operating on deadlines. You're following divine direction. You're sensing things before they happen. You're moving not by the logic of hours, but by the whispers of alignment. And yes, this may look like slowing down. It may look like stepping away from rigid goals or questioning systems that once made sense. But don't confuse this with apathy. It's not that you don't care, it's that your care has shifted from control to connection. Think about Eckhart Tolle, who described a complete time disorientation during his spiritual awakening. He could no longer live in the past-future trap that most of society operates in. Instead, he anchored into the now so deeply that time began to serve him, not rule him. Or look at someone like Leonardo da Vinci, who was known to abandon tasks midway and return to them years later, yet he still produced timeless masterpieces. His creations didn't come from forced productivity, but from flowing with divine inspiration when it arrived. Can you feel this shift within yourself too? That inner knowing that timing isn't about force, it's about flow. This is where chosen ones begin to perceive reality multidimensionally. You no longer look at life as a sequence of events. You feel everything happening simultaneously. You begin trusting intuition over itinerary. You follow a sacred yes in your spirit, even when the calendar says no. The universe begins to respond in kind. Synchronicities increase. Right people, right ideas, right opportunities appearing exactly when needed, not a moment sooner or later. You find a book that answers a question you asked silently. You hear a song lyric that speaks to the very thought you were wrestling with. These are not coincidences. These are confirmations that you are syncing with a divine timeline that exists beyond the human clock. Psalm 31:15 says, "My times are in your hands. Deliver me from the hands of my enemies." That verse becomes your posture. You stop chasing time and start submitting to God's timing. And in doing so, you start noticing something strange. Everything begins to happen faster, even when you feel like you're doing less. That's the paradox of divine flow. When you stop pushing, life starts delivering. When you stop scheduling every second, heaven starts organizing your destiny. Have you ever felt that? That uncanny sense that things are unfolding exactly as they should without your striving? Consider J.K. Rowling. The Harry Potter idea came to her in a moment of silence, on a delayed train. Not during a meeting, not on a schedule, but during stillness. She followed that spark, and a global phenomenon was born. Or look at Elon Musk, who often speaks about following intuition and vision over traditional timelines. His projects don't adhere to industry standards, they follow frequency and futuristic knowing. Chosen ones don't measure time by clocks. They measure it by kairos, divine moments saturated with meaning. But this doesn't mean you become irresponsible or float through life aimlessly. It means you begin to listen to your own spiritual cadence. You make room for the unknown. You hold space for mystery. You no longer panic when things seem off schedule, because you trust that divine timing cannot be rushed and it cannot be delayed. And in that surrender you find peace. Not because everything is predictable, but because you've stopped needing it to be. Isaiah 60:22 speaks directly to this truth. When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. That verse becomes a resting place for your soul. It reminds you that every delay is divine, that every acceleration is sacred, that when you align with Spirit, you are never behind. You are exactly where you need to be, even if no one else understands it. Even if the world says you're late, even if the timeline doesn't make sense, you are not behind schedule, you are in divine sequence. So as your connection to linear time dissolves, don't panic, don't resist it. Let it wash over you like a wave of truth. You're not becoming disoriented, you're becoming multidimensional. You're not losing your place, you're finding your presence. And in that presence is where real miracles unfold. Suddenly, you'll find yourself in the right place without planning it, saying the right thing without rehearsing it, meeting the right people without chasing them. That's not luck. That's the divine choreography of a chosen one who trusts their inner compass. Even Steve Jobs once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward." But chosen ones, they start to feel the dots connecting while they're happening. They don't need full certainty, they just need full obedience. That's the frequency of flow. So if you're feeling out of sync with calendars, if your plans no longer excite you, if you're finding peace in presence more than productivity, rejoice. This isn't the end of your ambition. It's the elevation of your awareness. You're not chasing life anymore. You're co-creating it, second by sacred second. Time is no longer your master. It is now your servant. And as you walk this path, the more you let go of control, the more the divine will reveal its perfect order. You're not late, you're not early, you're right on time for a timeline the world can't see. Because you, chosen one, are no longer bound to time. You are being carried by eternity. One of the strangest and most misunderstood symptoms of being a chosen one is this: you begin to crave solitude, not out of sadness, not from boredom, and certainly not because you feel unloved, but because something deep within you begins to ache for stillness. Even when you're surrounded by people who love you, who mean no harm, who bring joy, there's a whisper in your spirit that says, "Be still, come away, listen." You're not running from people, you're not rejecting connection. You're simply realizing that too much noise, no matter how well-meaning, begins to blur your spiritual signal. Have you ever felt completely exhausted after what should have been a fun, harmless gathering, or sensed that your energy, once clear and aligned, became cloudy just from absorbing the emotions of a room? That's not your imagination. That's your frequency tuning itself to something higher. This longing for solitude usually arrives after the energetic sensitivity phase, once your soul starts discerning not just who you're around, but what their energy leaves behind. Even the most casual conversation can feel like static if it's not spiritually aligned. Even the kindest people can leave you feeling drained if their energy is scattered or unresolved. And that's when something in you starts to withdraw, not in bitterness, not in judgment, but in sacred preservation. You stop craving crowds and start craving clarity. You unplug from constant notifications. You find joy in doing nothing, not because you're wasting time, but because you're allowing divine time to speak. Isaiah 30:15 holds a sacred truth for moments like this. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength. You begin to understand that solitude isn't isolation, it's invitation. An invitation into the realm where your soul is no longer distracted, distorted, or diluted. It's where you hear instructions not spoken by human voices, where your assignment becomes clear again, and where the divine whispers are louder than the world's demands. Have you ever had a moment where you were completely alone and yet felt more connected than ever? That's not emptiness. That's sacred presence. Take the example of Nikola Tesla, the brilliant inventor. He was famously reclusive, not because he disliked people, but because he understood that his visions required stillness. He once said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude." His creations, many ahead of his time, came from a place of silence, not chaos. Or consider the wisdom of Maya Angelou, who often retreated to hotel rooms just to write in peace, away from the pull of people and noise. Her words weren't just poetry, they were prophecy, birthed from quiet. You may notice now that time alone no longer feels uncomfortable, it feels restorative. You can sit in a room with no sound, no stimulation, no performance, and feel at peace. You're not being lazy, you're being recalibrated. Your nervous system, which spent years bracing for chaos, is finally able to rest. Your spirit, once silenced by noise, begins to sing again. You start to realize that being alone isn't the absence of company, it's the presence of God. Psalm 46:10 declares, "Be still and know that I am God." That verse, once just a phrase, now feels like breath to your soul. In your stillness, you are not missing out, you are tuning in. In your silence, you are not disconnected, you are becoming deeply rooted, because chosen ones don't find their power in noise, they find it in stillness. That's why, when you do return to the world, when you speak, when you move, when you act, it carries weight, because it's been filtered through heaven. Even someone like Beyoncé, one of the most seen women in the world, has spoken about how much solitude matters to her creative and spiritual process. Behind her presence is preparation in quiet spaces. That's where the true work happens. That's where the spirit is restored. The world sees the performance, but chosen ones know the stillness that powers it. Are you starting to feel guilty for canceling plans that once excited you? For choosing quiet over conversation? Don't. That isn't selfishness, it's sacred self-preservation. You're beginning to trust that not all presence is purposeful, that not all connection is nourishing. You're learning to say yes to your inner peace even when others don't understand, and that is one of the bravest things a chosen one can do. You no longer chase company, you attract alignment. Mark 1:35 reveals a divine pattern. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. If even Christ, the Son of God, needed solitude to recalibrate and receive instruction, how much more do you too? You're not withdrawing from your mission. You're entering the inner chamber where your mission becomes clear. Think of Greta Thunberg, the young climate activist. She began with solitary protests, just one girl and a sign. No crowds, no fanfare. But that solitude carried such spiritual clarity, it ignited a movement. She didn't need a stage to begin, she needed stillness. You don't always need a microphone. Sometimes you just need a mountain, a quiet room, a single journal, a walk under the stars. That's where divine downloads land. That's where your spiritual GPS recalibrates. You may wonder, is it okay that I don't want to be around people right now? Yes. More than okay, it's essential. Because stillness is not absence. It's spiritual absorption. It's the moment when heaven speaks and you have no distractions to misinterpret it. This is the season where you don't just rest your body, you remember your calling. You retrieve pieces of your soul that the world tried to scatter. And here's the great irony. The more solitude you allow, the more power you carry when you do re-enter the world. You show up clearer, more grounded, less reactive. Your words have more weight. Your steps leave more impact. Because you didn't just rest, you recharged at a spiritual voltage most people never touch. That's why when you speak, people pause. When you act, things shift. When you show up, the atmosphere changes. You're not just a person, you're a frequency. And that frequency was fine-tuned in solitude. Something begins rising inside you, and although it doesn't speak in words, its presence is undeniable. It's not loud in volume, but it's loud in truth. It's a pressure from the inside out, not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that awakens. You can't quite explain it to anyone, not even to yourself. You just know, deeply, fiercely, without question. You didn't come here just to wake up, pay bills, and repeat someone else's rhythm. You didn't arrive in this lifetime merely to survive or exist in the shadows of what's expected. You came here to do something specific, something that only your soul has the blueprint for. But here's the part that twists the mind and stretches the heart. You don't yet know what it is. Not fully, not clearly. It's not a job title. It's not a 5-year plan. It's something beyond language, something sacred that bubbles beneath the surface of your consciousness. Have you felt that? That aching clarity with no label, that sacred purpose with no name? And that's where the tension starts. You get flashes, visions in dreams, words that hit your heart out of nowhere, a moment of stillness that fills you with unshakable certainty, only for it all to fade when you try to hold on to it. You're not broken, you're being led. God is not withholding clarity from you, He's protecting your purity. You're not meant to have all the details yet. Why? Because if you saw the full vision before you were ready, your ego would try to build it by force. But now you're entering a phase few ever reach, soul recognition without ego interference. You're beginning to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And that kind of remembrance takes time, trust, and surrender. In Jeremiah 29:5-11, God declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." That verse becomes more than just comfort. It becomes confirmation. You may not know the whole plan, but God does. And that sense of not enough that you feel in your current job, your current label, your current routine, that's not ungratefulness, that's divine dissatisfaction. It's your spirit saying, I was made for more, not more fame, not more money, more meaning, more alignment, more truth. This is the season where many chosen ones begin to wrestle with their identity. You no longer feel connected to the roles you once embraced. The titles that once made you feel secure now feel like cages. The goals you once obsessed over now seem hollow. You're no longer chasing what the world calls success. You're craving what heaven calls obedience. And yes, that can feel confusing, especially when you can't articulate it to anyone else. Friends may think you're being moody. Family may think you're throwing away your potential. But what they can't see is that your soul is being reprogrammed, and only you can feel the instructions being downloaded in silence. Consider Florence Nightingale, who walked away from a privileged life to follow a calling she couldn't fully explain at the time. Her decision to pursue nursing, radical for a woman of her status in her era, came from that same inner knowing. She wasn't chasing status, she was answering spirit. Or think of Martin Luther King Jr., who had every reason to stay quiet, every excuse to pursue comfort. But something rose inside him, something he couldn't ignore. That something didn't come with a plan, it came with a pull, and from that pull, history was changed. Have you started to feel like the life you're living no longer matches the spirit you carry? That's the sign. That's the signal. That's your soul knocking on the door of your consciousness, asking to be let in. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it gets. Not to torment you, but to transform you. Because chosen ones are not allowed to settle, not because God is cruel, but because He is intentional. You were designed to carry something sacred, and that sacred thing cannot thrive in shallow soil, so He pulls you deeper, out of the comfortable, out of the conventional, into the mysterious. John 10:27 says, "My sheep listen to my voice, I know them, and they follow me." That's what's happening. You are hearing His voice, not in booming sentences, but in holy discomfort, in subtle shifts, in restless nights, and in sudden clarity. You're no longer moved by ego, you're moved by essence, and that essence is your compass now. Look at the story of George Harrison, the quiet Beatle. As fame surrounded him, he found himself drawn away from the spotlight and into deep spiritual searching. His music eventually became an expression of soul over stardom, truth over trend. He followed an inner path the world didn't understand, but his legacy became richer for it. Sometimes your mission won't be loud, sometimes it will be deeply personal, quiet, sacred, hidden, but just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's not holy. So if you're feeling disconnected from your current reality yet magnetically drawn to something you can't define, trust that. That's not confusion, that's calibration. Your spirit is beginning to tune itself to your true assignment. And that assignment won't always come with applause, it won't always be understood, but it will always be yours. You may not be called to save the world in public, but you may be called to change someone's world in private. A conversation, a healing, a shift, a word in season that awakens something eternal in someone else. You won't always see the fruit immediately, but chosen ones don't move by sight, they move by spirit. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." That's you, called according to His purpose, not your plan, not the world's pattern. So don't worry if your timeline doesn't make sense. Don't panic if your 5-year goal dissolves into divine mystery. You're not drifting, you're being drawn, and drawn things often feel like falling until you realize you've been caught by grace all along. This is the final layer, the last veil. The threshold that once crossed alters everything permanently, and once you step into this space, there is no going back. Not to who you were, not to who they thought you were, not to the diluted version of yourself that once fit so easily into conversations, into rooms, into expectations that weren't built for your soul. When this layer activates, you lose the capacity to perform. You simply can't fake it anymore. You can't pretend to be interested in what no longer feeds your spirit. You can't force smiles that feel like masks. You can't sit through surface-level chatter when your spirit is wired for depth. You can't present a watered-down version of yourself just to avoid making others uncomfortable. And yet, this isn't rebellion, it's revelation. You're not becoming rude, you're becoming real. Have you felt this lately? That inner tension when you try to shrink to fit into old dynamics. That almost physical resistance in your body when you try to mute your truth for the sake of keeping the peace. That's not just personal preference, it's your soul refusing to betray itself. This is the layer where your spirit decides it will no longer pay the price of inauthenticity. And when you reach this point, the transformation is irreversible. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because faking it has simply become impossible. You've tasted freedom, and anything less than truth now feels like poison. John 8:32 says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This isn't just about divine truth in theory. It's about your personal truth in practice. The truth of your voice, the truth of your presence, the truth of your energy when it walks into a room, unapologetically whole. This truth sets you free from performance, from people-pleasing, from the need to be palatable. You're no longer filtering your spirit to be digestible for those still living in illusion. And while that freedom feels electric, it also comes with cost. Because once you begin showing up in your full essence, people begin responding differently. Some will feel uncomfortable. Your authenticity will mirror their avoidance. Your light will reveal their shadows. You may notice people pull back, criticize, or try to label your truth as too much, too intense, or too serious. That's not your burden. That's their discomfort meeting your alignment. But on the flip side, others will be magnetized, drawn in, awakened. There will be people who encounter the real you and finally feel safe enough to become real themselves. And that, chosen one, is your true impact. You don't inspire people by being perfect. You liberate them by being real. Take Robin Williams, for example. Behind the laughter was a man of intense depth and sensitivity. He didn't always fit the mold of what others expected, but his realness gave millions permission to feel, to reflect, to break open. Or think of Frida Kahlo, whose art and presence defied social norms and expectations. Her raw self-expression was often misunderstood, but she painted with a kind of honesty that outlived her critics. Are you beginning to sense that your authenticity may disturb some but heal many? And here's where your power multiplies. You feel free, maybe for the first time in your life, free from pretending, free from explaining, free from the exhausting loop of trying to be liked instead of being true. You start moving from a place of inner conviction rather than external approval. You no longer ask, will they accept me if I show up as I am? Instead, you declare, I accept me, and that is enough. That shift changes everything, because authenticity is not just an act, it's an atmosphere. When you step into a room as your full self, you either activate people or you agitate them. Either way, something shifts. And that, chosen one, is why your presence now feels like prophecy. Galatians 1:10 asks, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? This verse becomes your mirror. You stop living for applause and start living for alignment. You stop chasing validation and start embodying value. Not the kind that's given to you, but the kind that was always in you. The kind that was buried beneath layers of conditioning, trauma, and social expectation. But now, it's rising, and when it rises, everything changes. This final layer strips you of the need to belong in places that require you to betray your essence. You'd rather be alone in peace than surrounded in pretense. You'd rather say less but mean more. You'd rather lose the crowd and keep your soul. And that makes you dangerous to systems of manipulation, conformity, and control, because authenticity is a rebellion in a world addicted to illusion. Think of Jim Carrey, who reached the height of Hollywood success only to step away and declare that he was done performing for approval. His interviews became sermons. His humor transformed into spiritual reflections. He no longer needed the stage. He had become the message. That's what happens when chosen ones reach this level of awakening. You stop needing a platform. You are the platform. You stop needing permission. You are the permission. You stop speaking to be heard. You speak because your voice carries frequency. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, and when the Spirit rises in you, that freedom manifests as truth. And that truth, it will offend some and awaken others, but it will never leave things the same. Your smile, when authentic, becomes more powerful than a speech. Your silence, when rooted in truth, becomes louder than noise. You don't just enter rooms, you alter them, because you're not performing anymore, you're embodying. So let people respond how they will. Let the uncomfortable turn away. Let the aligned draw near. Because you're not here to convince. You're here to transmit. You're not here to adapt. You're here to activate. You're not here to fit in. You're here to wake up. And every time you choose to be real over being accepted, you expand your capacity to carry your true assignment. This is the moment where you stop asking, will they like me? And start asking, am I being honest with myself and God? And when the answer is yes, you move forward, confident, untamed, light-filled, not always understood, but always authentic. Because once this layer is unlocked, once you've tasted the freedom of full embodiment, there's no pretending left in you, no shrinking, no twisting, no taming. You are no longer a mirror for others' expectations. You are a mirror of divine truth. And that truth, it cannot be silenced. You are not just awakened, you are revealed. You are not just seen, you are known by God, by your spirit, by the mission that brought you here. And now the world meets the real you, not the version you crafted for comfort, but the version you were called to become. Welcome to the final layer. This is the place where chosen ones rise. This is the deepest and most sacred symptom of a chosen one's awakening, the return to truth. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it doesn't demand attention. It simply arrives, softly, but undeniably, and rewrites everything from the inside out. You begin to feel it in your posture, your voice, your presence. You're no longer molding yourself to fit into frames others designed for you. You're no longer twisting your truth to gain approval or sculpting your personality to keep others comfortable. You're no longer willing to shrink just to be liked, welcomed, or included. Something within you has awakened so fully that pretending is no longer an option and performance has no place in your presence. You're not grounded in ego, you're grounded in clarity. And this clarity, it doesn't complicate your life, it simplifies it. Suddenly decisions that once kept you up at night become obvious. Boundaries that once felt hard to draw become second nature. You stop explaining your intuition. You stop second-guessing your discernment. You stop apologizing for existing. Because once you truly remember who you are, who God made you to be, you lose all interest in being anyone else. You don't need a script. You don't need a strategy. You don't need to impress. You just need to be. And that kind of alignment doesn't come from information. It comes from revelation. Have you reached this moment, chosen one? The moment when you realize that being misunderstood is better than being misaligned. That being real, even when it costs you popularity, is more nourishing than being praised for a version of yourself that isn't true. This is the space where your awakening becomes permanent, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've stopped faking. You've surrendered the illusion. You've released the mask, and that surrender is the doorway to lasting transformation. Romans 12:2 speaks to this exact shift. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You've stopped conforming, you're being transformed. And that transformation isn't always visible on the outside. It's internal, it's energetic, it's foundational. It shifts how you see yourself, how you move through the world, how you define success, and how you relate to God. It recalibrates your values. It reorders your priorities. It restores your authority. Consider the life of Rosa Parks. Her refusal to give up her seat wasn't loud, but it was unshakably real. It wasn't a performance. It was a moment of divine alignment with truth. That one act of authenticity shifted history. She didn't act like someone she wasn't. She remembered who she was. Or look at Alan Watts, the spiritual philosopher who walked away from religious systems that felt hollow and began teaching spiritual truth in ways that woke up a generation. He didn't seek to be accepted, he sought to be true, and that seeking changed lives. You may notice now that you can no longer tolerate anything inauthentic. Not in relationships, not in work, not in worship. You can't sit in rooms that force you to shrink. You can't agree with things that contradict your spirit. You can't pretend to be okay just to keep the peace. And you know what? That makes you rare. Because the world is built on performance, on curated images, on calculated behavior, on doing the right thing, even when it means abandoning your soul. But you've broken that spell. You've remembered the divine code within you. You've chosen clarity over comfort. And that choice changes everything. Psalm 15:2 says, "The one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart." You're walking in that now. You're not trying to be flawless. You're choosing to be true. You're not trying to be impressive. You're choosing to be whole. You've released the fear of being too much. You've stopped negotiating your presence. You've realized that what makes you different is exactly what makes you divine. And let's be honest, this clarity can be isolating. The moment you stop performing, some people stop clapping. The moment you stop saying yes to what dishonors your spirit, people may accuse you of changing, but chosen one, you haven't changed. You've returned. You've returned to your original design, and that return is your strength. Think about Bob Dylan. At the height of his popularity, he famously switched musical styles, upsetting fans who expected him to stay in their preferred box. But he followed his truth, and though he lost some applause, he gained authenticity. His legacy didn't shrink, it expanded. Because truth always outlives performance. Are you starting to feel this too? That unshakable knowing that your truth is more valuable than any spotlight, that alignment feels better than applause, that peace feels better than pretending. You're not being dramatic, you're being delivered from the lie that you had to earn love by being less of yourself. You're being restored to the you that speaks without fear, that sets boundaries without guilt, that stands tall without apology. Galatians 5:1 declares, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm, then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." You are no longer a slave to appearances. You are no longer performing for a seat at tables God never asked you to sit at. You're standing firm in your freedom, and in doing so you've become rare. Not just rare in personality, but rare in frequency, rare in integrity, rare in spiritual clarity, rare in truth. Even actress Viola Davis has shared how she reached a point in her career where she could no longer take roles that compromised her voice or misrepresented her identity. She walked away from opportunities that others would have taken without hesitation, not because she thought she was better, but because she knew she was clear. That clarity is what you're living in now, and it's not arrogance, it's spiritual authority. So if you've been wondering why things feel simpler lately, even as you walk through uncertainty, it's because you're no longer lying to yourself. You're no longer fragmented. You're no longer acting. You're aligned. And that alignment allows heaven to move through you without obstruction. You're not just speaking truth, you are truth in motion. And that makes you extremely rare. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to keep being real. Keep being grounded. Keep being you. The you that God designed. The you that doesn't waver. The you that no longer performs. Because in a world obsessed with pretending, your authenticity is revolutionary. Your awakening is permanent. Not because you've mastered life, but because you've refused to fake it. That's what makes you chosen, and that's what makes you free. If you've experienced even a few of these layers, those strange but sacred shifts that have stirred your spirit and pulled you out of your former life, then hear this clearly. Chosen one, you are not going crazy. You are not losing touch with reality. You are not broken, dysfunctional, or confused. What you're going through isn't some emotional breakdown or psychological side effect. It is an activation, a divine recalibration, a call back to the deepest memory your soul holds, the remembrance of who you truly are. This awakening is not random. It's not a coincidence, and it's certainly not something that happens to everyone. It is a symptom of a rare spiritual trajectory, a deeper timeline that only the few, the chosen, are called to walk. And yes, it can be disorienting. Why? Because for your entire life, you were trained to survive. You were taught to suppress your instincts, follow the script, seek approval, and ignore the strange whispers of your inner knowing. But now, all of that is unraveling. Your soul has decided it's time to stop surviving and time to start remembering. Do you feel it? That quiet but steady sense that something ancient is awakening in you, that there's more to your presence here than comfort, career, or conformity. You're not imagining that pull. It's real. It's the compass of your spirit, turning toward a higher path, a path that doesn't just affect your life, it impacts lives. Ephesians 2:10 affirms this beautifully. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. That means this moment, this very awakening, is part of a divine design that existed long before you took your first breath. Your current discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something eternal is unfolding. You're not breaking down. You're breaking through the illusions, through the noise, through the old patterns that kept your true self buried beneath layers of survival. And let's be honest, it's not easy. It's not glamorous. Awakening doesn't come with a user manual. Some days you feel like you're flying. Other days it feels like your soul is being scraped clean. You oscillate between deep clarity and moments of doubt. But even in your uncertainty, something inside you knows you're being reshaped for something bigger, not louder, not more famous, but more aligned, more intentional, more powerful in the unseen ways that shift realities. Think of someone like Nelson Mandela. Before the world called him a leader, he was stripped of everything: freedom, family, reputation. And yet it was during that solitary confinement in prison that his deeper timeline activated. He stopped living for survival. He began remembering his mission. Or consider spiritual author Caroline Myss, who walked away from the mainstream in order to teach intuitive healing long before it was accepted. She didn't know where it would lead, she just knew she had to follow it. You're feeling that same nudge now, aren't you? You may find yourself questioning why your old life feels so foreign, why you can't go back to the same conversations, the same goals, the same rhythms. That's because your spirit has outgrown the shell. Your vibration has shifted, and when your soul levels up, your reality must follow. It's not rejection, it's redirection. And as hard as it is to walk away from what once made sense, something greater is waiting to be born through your surrender. Isaiah 42:16 promises, "I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths I will guide them. I will turn the darkness into light before them." That's what this phase is. You may not see the full picture yet, but you are being led, guided not by fear, but by a holy invitation to trust what you feel more than what you can explain. And as that trust deepens, your mission becomes clearer. You're not just here to awaken for yourself, you're being prepared to lead. But here's what leadership means for the chosen. Not power over others, but power within yourself. You're not here to dominate, you're here to radiate, to reflect what truth feels like in human form, to live so authentically that your very presence becomes a permission slip for others to be real, to show people that freedom doesn't come from pretending, but from remembering. And that kind of leadership requires something rare: wholeness. You must embody what you preach. You must live what you know, not just say it. And yes, that's why the world suddenly feels louder. That's why you feel the pull to go inward. That's why even small interactions feel heavier, because your energy is no longer compatible with distraction. You're shedding what's not real to make room for what's divine. You're stepping into the kind of frequency where integrity isn't optional, it's required. Think of Malidoma Somé, the African shaman who was initiated into his tribe's wisdom after being kidnapped and educated in the West. He carried both worlds, spiritual and modern, and used his story to guide thousands through their own soul awakenings. He didn't just teach with words, he embodied sacred transformation. That's what you're being shaped for. Not a moment of fame, a lifetime of frequency. And maybe you've been afraid. Maybe you've thought, I'm not ready, I don't have the tools, I don't know what I'm doing. But let me tell you this, chosen one, you don't have to know everything to be ready. You just have to be willing. You just have to keep showing up. Keep listening to the voice inside that doesn't speak in fear but in fire. The voice that says, you were made for this. 2 Corinthians 4:7 reveals, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. You are the jar, God is the treasure. And your cracks, they're not flaws, they're conduits for light. Every layer of your awakening has prepared you to be a vessel, not of perfection, but of power. So if you're feeling out of place in this world, remember, you weren't made to blend in. You were made to lead a new way of being. Your awakening is not an accident, it's an announcement to the universe that you are no longer living a borrowed identity. You are walking in your divine assignment. You're not just going through a spiritual shift, you're stepping into divine alignment. You're not just here to feel the light, you're here to be the light. And as you continue rising, know this, the world may not always understand you, but heaven recognizes you. You are seen, you are sent, you are chosen. As we close this sacred journey through the deepest layers of spiritual awakening, I want you to pause and recognize something powerful. If you saw yourself in these words, if even one sentence stirred something ancient and familiar inside you, then you, chosen one, are not just awakening. You're being called. You've been handpicked to carry a frequency this world desperately needs. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are becoming exactly who God destined you to be. Boldly, slowly, divinely, and even though the road may be lonely at times, it is also holy, because the path you walk now is not crowded, but it is consecrated. You are the living proof that awakening is real, and no matter how long it takes, no matter how many layers you move through, Once your soul begins to remember, you cannot unknow who you are. So keep going, keep listening, keep rising, because your very presence is a message, a mirror, a movement. You are not just witnessing a shift, you are the shift. And whether your mission is loud or quiet, public or private, visible or unseen, it is sacred. Thank you for walking this path with me. Thank you for allowing your spirit to be open, your heart to be honest, and your soul to be seen. If this message spoke to you, healed you, or confirmed something you've been quietly carrying, and if you feel led to support this work, you can do so through the Super Thanks feature right here on YouTube. But please know this, whether you donate or not, your presence, your time, and your energy are deeply valued. I am truly grateful for each and every one of you who listens, shares, comments, and walks in the light of your truth. May your awakening continue to unfold in divine timing. May clarity meet you in your stillness. May strength rise in your silence. And may love, pure, anchoring, untouchable love guide you through every transformation ahead. You are chosen. You are powerful. You are rising. And I bless you in every dimension, now and always. Amen.